Welcome to True Crime Cases today. We are unveiling a shocking story of jealousy and violence. Arya was the brightest star at Clarendon University until one chilling night when she vanished. Without a trace, as her friends and family searched, desperately, for answers, all eyes turned to Jameson, the quiet computer science major with a dark past. He insisted he had nothing to do with her disappearance, but Detective Ruth was unconvinced. With each new piece of evidence, the walls closed in on Jameson and it wasn't just his alibi that fell apart, it was Heist's entire life. Arya was the heart of Clarendon University, a bright, ambitious student who seemed to have everything going for her, known for her magnetic personality. She had a way of making people feel seen. Her enthusiasm, contagious, whether she was leading a class project or cheering on friends from the sidelines of campus events. A communications major with dreams of working in media, Arya was the kind of person everyone assumed would go far in life. So when she failed to show up for her morning lecture on a chilly March day, it wasn't just unusual, it was alarming. Her absence was first noted by her roommate, who found Arya's bed empty and untouched. At first she thought Arya might have stayed out late, studying in the library, or crashed at a friend's dorm after an impromptu study session. But as the morning wore on and texts to Arya went unanswered, worry began to set in. By lunchtime, friends were whispering among themselves, and Arya's professors had begun to ask around. It wasn't long before her disappearance became the main topic of conversation on campus. Theories swirled in every corner of Clarendon, from the bustling coffee shop to the quiet library halls. Maybe she had gone on a spontaneous trip without telling anyone, or perhaps she was hiding out after an argument. But as the hours ticked by, those theories began to feel less plausible. Arya's phone was off, her social media accounts inactive, a stark contrast to her usual presence online when a search of her dorm room revealed that her wallet and keys were still there. Panic began to spread by evening. The campus was abuzz with activity. Flyers with Arya's face were printed and posted across the university grounds and nearby streets. Students and staff gathered in groups to organize search parties, scouring every corner of the campus and its surrounding areas. The police were called in, and their investigation began. In earnest, the officers worked quickly to establish a timeline of Arya's last known movements. They learned she had attended a group study session at the library the previous evening, where she'd stayed until nearly midnight. She had left alone, according to her friends, heading back toward her dorm. But somewhere along that short walk, she'd vanished. Interviews with students yielded few leads. Some claimed to have seen her walking briskly across the quad, her head down against the biting cold. Others mentioned hearing what sounded like an argument near the dormitories. Around the same time Arya would have been returning. But these accounts were vague and unverified, leaving the police grasping for solid clues. As night fell again, the atmosphere on campus grew tense. Fear and uncertainty took hold, casting a shadow over the once bustling university. Arya's friends were inconsolable, torn between grief and the faint hope that she might still be found alive. When dawn broke the next day, their realization began to sink in. Arya wasn't just missing, something far darker had happened, and the peaceful facade of Clarendon University had been shattered. The hunt for Arya's fate and the truth behind her disappearance had only just begun. 2 agonizing weeks passed after Arya's disappearance, and the campus community at Clarendon University was gripped by a sense of dread. Searches had turned up nothing but cold leads, and the once bustling campus had grown eerily quiet. Fear lingered in every hallway and classroom. Students walked in pairs, avoiding dimly lit areas, while parents bombarded university officials with calls demanding answers. The small town of Redwood Falls, known for its peaceful charm, felt transformed by the sinister mystery hanging over it. Then, early one morning, the silence was broken. A jogger out for a routine run in the woods just beyond the campus stumbled upon something that would change everything. Initially, he thought it was just a pile of disturbed earth, perhaps dug up by an animal. But as he stepped closer, the faint outline of something horrifying came into view, a hand protruding from the ground. Shocked and panicked, he called the authorities. Immediately, within hours, the area was swarming with law enforcement, crime scene investigators, and search dogs. The shallow grave was carefully excavated, revealing the lifeless body of Arya. Her once bright smile, so familiar in photos shared across campus, was now replaced with a haunting stillness. She had been brutally murdered, her body bearing evidence of a violent struggle. The official cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head. The discovery sent shockwaves through the university and the surrounding community. Arya's death confirmed the worst fears of those who had been holding out hope that she might somehow be found alive. Candlelight vigils were held across campus with students, faculty, and townspeople gathering to mourn the loss of a young woman whose life had been senselessly cut short. For investigators, the discovery of Arya's body marked a crucial turning point. With physical evidence now in hand, the search for her killer intensified. The location of her burial site provided the first clue. It was remote yet accessible, a place likely chosen by someone familiar with the area. The investigators combed the scene for anything that might point to the perpetrator. Footprints, fibers, traces of DNA, but the wooded terrain offered limited clues. Attention turned back to M's final hours surveillance footage from the library showed her leaving alone shortly after midnight, bundled in a heavy coat. Against the cold, he appeared calm, unaware of the danger awaiting her. Investigators traced her usual route back to her dorm, analyzing every camera along the way. In one chilling clip, a shadowy figure could be seen trailing behind her at a distance, but the image was too blurry to make a positive identification. Witness statements were revisited with a renewed sense of urgency. Students who had reported hearing an argument near the dorms were questioned again, but their recollections remained vague. Some thought they had heard a man's voice raised in anger, but no one could provide a clear description. The discovery of Arya's body also brought with it a grim sense of finality. The carefree days of campus life were gone, replaced by a pervasive anxiety. Students avoided venturing out after dark, and the presence of police officers patrolling the grounds was a constant reminder of the unspeakable tragedy that had unfolded as Arya's family prepared to lay her arrest. The investigation pressed forward. Detectives knew that the person who had committed this heinous act was still out there, perhaps even walking among the very students who now lived. In fear, the race was on to uncover the truth, and the pressure to find Arya's killer was mounting with each passing day. As investigators continued piecing together Arya's final hours, their focus gradually shifted toward potential suspects. With Arya's body found and evidence of a violent death confirmed, the pressure to solve the case mounted. Detectives reviewed every lead, from vague witness statements to security footage, searching for the one thread that might unravel the mystery. One name kept surfacing. Jameson was a junior at Clarendon University, majoring in computer science. A known introvert, he often kept to himself, preferring the glow of his laptop screen to the company of his peers. But his connection to Arya was undeniable. Jameson and Arya had dated for several months, a relationship that had ended abruptly only weeks before her disappearance. Friends described their breakup as messy, with heated arguments spilling out into public view on more than one occasion. For investigators, this history was enough to warrant closer scrutiny. Initially, Jameson appeared cooperative when approached by police. He calmly answered their questions, maintaining that he had nothing to do with Arya's disappearance or death. He claimed to have been in the campus tech lab the night Arya vanished, working on a coding project that had consumed much of his semester. Security logs seemed to support his alibi, showing that Jameson had indeed swiped into the lab around 10 p.m. and remained there until the early hours of the morning. But something about Jameson's demeanor unsettled investigators. He was composed, too composed, as if he had rehearsed his responses. They decided to dig deeper, scrutinizing his movements and cross-referencing his timeline with other evidence. What they found began to unravel Jameson's carefully constructed story. Campus surveillance footage showed Jameson leaving the tech lab shortly after 11:30 p.m., roughly 30 minutes before Arya left the library. He returned nearly 2 hours later, just before 1:30 a.m. When asked about this gap, Jameson claimed he had gone for a drive to clear his head, a habit he insisted was common when he was feeling stressed. His explanation might have sufficed if not for the growing inconsistencies in his story. Witnesses came forward describing a car matching Jameson's in the vicinity of the woods, where Arya's body was discovered. Additionally, a campus parking lot camera captured a blurry image of a vehicle resembling his driving toward the edge of campus that night. As suspicions mounted, detectives obtained a warrant to search Jameson's belongings. His car, parked neatly in the lot outside his apartment, was the first target. What they found there sent a ripple of anticipation through the investigative team. a small trace of blood barely visible to the naked eye. Beneath the passenger seat, the discovery was sent for DNA analysis, and within days, it was confirmed to be Ms. Jamieson had a new explanation ready. He claimed the blood was from a nosebleed Arya had suffered, while they were still dating months before her disappearance. But investigators weren't convinced. Jamieson's life began to unravel as more questions were raised. His calm exterior began to crack under the weight of mounting evidence, but he continued to deny any involvement yet. For those investigating Arya's case, Jamieson had become the prime suspect. All they needed now was pride strong enough to tear apart the wall of lies he had built around himself. Jamieson, composed Assad, began to crumble under the mounting weight of evidence and suspicion. The discovery of Arya's blood in his car had pushed him to the forefront of the investigation, but proving he was responsible for her murder required more than circumstantial connections. Detectives were determined to uncover the truth, delving deeper into Jamieson's life, behavior, and movements in the weeks surrounding Arya's death. The first breakthrough came when investigators obtained a warrant to search Jamieson's computer. Forensic analysts meticulously combed through his hard drive, recovering deleted files and browsing history. What they found painted a troubling picture. In the days leading up to Arya's disappearance, Jamieson had searched for topics like how to dispose of a body, shallow grave locations, and how long does it take for evidence to degrade. These searches, though chilling, weren't direct proof of murder, but they strongly suggested premeditation. Jamieson's explanation for these searches was as calculated as it was implausible. He claimed they were part of a research project for a criminology course. He wasn't even enrolled in. Detectives saw through the excuse but knew they needed more concrete evidence. To secure a conviction, they turned their focus back to the gaps in his alibi. Reviewing every piece of data from the night Arya disappeared, cell phone records revealed another crack in Jamieson's story. While he had insisted he spent the majority of the night in the campus tech lab, his phone pinged off a tower near the wooded area where Arya's body was found during the 2-hour window he had claimed to be driving. To clear his head, this revelation tied him more closely to the scene, but still fell short of definitive proof. Meanwhile, Arya's friends came forward with details that added weight to the investigation. Several of them revealed that Jamieson had struggled to accept the breakup. He had sent Arya a series of increasingly desperate and angry messages. In the weeks before her disappearance, one message sent just 2 days before she was last seen read ominously, "You'll regret ignoring me." For investigators, this was further evidence of Jamieson's deteriorating mental state and potential motive, but they needed the one piece of evidence that could directly connect him to Arya's death. They revisited the crime scene and its surroundings, hoping something had been overlooked. It was during this exhaustive secondary search that they found Arya's smartwatch in a storm drain not far from Jamieson's apartment. The device, though waterlogged and damaged, was sent to a digital forensics team after hours of painstaking work. They retrieved its data. The smartwatch held a damning record of Arya's final moments. Heart rate spikes indicated a struggle, and GPS data placed her in Jamieson's car during the critical time frame. This evidence, combined with the blood in his vehicle and his suspicious searches, created a nearly unassailable case. Jamieson, once confident he could outsmart investigators, now found himself trapped in a web of evidence he couldn't explain away. As the prosecution prepared their case, it became clear that his lies were unraveling, each thread pulling him closer to justice for the heinous crime he thought he could conceal. As the case against Jamieson solidified, the final phase of the investigation unfolded with a sense of inevitability. The pieces of the puzzle were now in place, and there was no longer any doubt that Jamieson was responsible for Arya's brutal murder. Yet despite the overwhelming evidence, he remained remarkably composed, insisting on his innocence right up until the breakthrough that sealed Jamieson's fate came when the smartwatch Arya had been wearing the night of her disappearance was recovered from a storm drain not far from his apartment. Forensic specialists worked tirelessly to extract the data, and what they found was undeniable. The smartwatch's heart rate monitor had recorded a dramatic spike in Arya's pulse at the exact time she would have been in Jamieson's car. The GPS data placed her in the vicinity of the woods where her body was later found, and the last recorded movement of the device was consistent with the pattern of a struggle. This discovery, combined with the blood in Jamieson's car, his disturbing online searches, and witness statements, left prosecutors with a clear picture of What had happened that night? Arya had likely been lured into Jameson's car under the false pretense of a conversation. The evidence suggested she'd tried to escape, but Jameson had violently attacked her, ultimately ending her life in a secluded area. Her smartwatch, a silent witness to the final moments of her life, now served as the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. When Jameson was finally arrested, he remained eerily calm, as if he still believed he could talk his way out of the situation. But the case against him was airtight. His alibi had been shattered. His online behavior had painted a damning picture of premeditation, and the physical evidence left no room for plausible deniability. As the trial began, the weight of the evidence became clear to everyone in the courtroom, including Thiegery. Jameson's defense team tried to argue that the blood in his car was from previous incident and that the search history was innocent. But the overwhelming proof, Arya's smartwatch data, the blood, the cell phone records, and the witness accounts, was too much to counter. Jameson's facade of innocence began to crack under the intense scrutiny.